What's up and welcome to another episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're doing a detailed review on the Asus Strix G17. For the processor, we've got a Ryzen 9 5900HX overclockable processor. Now keep in mind, this is overclockable by Asus, not the individual user. This goes above the standard 45 watt cap and it goes up to 80 watts, but when rendering with Handbrake, it actually peaks out at 76.5 watts. Now when under a dual load, the CPU pulls 53.8 watts. Now the RTX 3070 can pull up to 128 watts of power under a GPU only load, but when under a dual GPU CPU load, it pulls 111 watts of power. Now the reason I'm pointing out these power limits is that because of Dynamic Boost 2.0, the difference in performance that you'll see from laptop to laptop can be dramatic, depending on how much electricity is pushed through the components. Now this year AMD is using liquid metal to cool these components, and as you'll see when we get to the stress test, the temperatures on this machine are quite excellent. Now I measured the 300 Hz display at 355 nits brightness, 93% sRGB, and 75% Adobe RGB. Overall, the display is above average in the brightness category and it pops nicely, and the adaptive sync prevents any kind of screen tearing in your gameplay. I really enjoyed using this display. That said, QHD displays are here, and if you're someone that doesn't need 300 Hz, a QHD display offers more detail in games as well as just everyday Windows 10 usage. Now this comes with 16 gigs of DDR4-3200 MHz RAM, a 1TB PCIe SSD, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1, which worked exceptionally well, providing high download speeds on my fiber internet connection. And it is 0.92 inches thin at the thinnest and 1.08 inches thick at the thickest, kind of where the rubber feet are located. Overall, this is an extremely powerful machine in a very thin and light chassis, despite the fact that this is only a little bit thicker than something like a Razer Blade Pro 17, like this guy right here. You're still packing in way higher power components in a much less expensive chassis. So these specs are amazing, especially for the $1799 price point. Like, there's basically no massive glaring weakness, at least on paper. Overall, I really like the way the laptop looks, especially in a dark room. The LEDs just really pop out more than any other laptop. Now, I love the GE66, but the coverage this laptop has going all the way around, I think just looks a little bit better. Now, the port selection on this machine is not amazing. You've got 3 USB-A's, a USB-C that doubles as a display port out, and a 100 watt power delivery charging solution. So if you need some power on the go, you may not need to take the full-size power brick with you. You can use a smaller USB-C power adapter. That said, the battery life on this is excellent as well, so you can have all-day usage away from the wall as needed, as long as you're optimizing your usage appropriately. Obviously, if you play games on it or do a bunch of CPU rendering and stuff like that, you're going to kill the battery much faster. Now the keyboard layout is excellent. You got a full-size numpad key, and the home and page up, page down keys also work on the arrow keys. Overall, the keyboard itself feels great. 2 giant thumbs up. Now the touchpad on this machine is fantastic. It's smooth, it's large, it clicks well. The only downside is near the top, it's a little bit harder to click. Now the Asus software Armory Crate, which is included with this laptop, is how you control the fan profiles, adjust the lights, and it works really well, did not crash on me, and it's all located in this central location. Now this device has 4 fan profiles: silent, performance, turbo, and manual. If you use manual, you can set the fan profile curve, so you can adjust the fans and tune them exactly how you want as a user, and it's a very easy way to overclock the GPU, and it includes a 100 MHz GPU overclock and a 120 Hz memory overclock. In my performance testing, I always test with the highest max fan possible and highest default settings included with the laptop. So this is the sound of me talking, and that is the sound of the max fans going on. This is turbofan mode now after the heat has been adjusted. Now this is performance mode. And now we're on silent mode. Now, compared to the last generation of Strix G17 I tested a few months ago, this has about a 3 decibel reduction in fan noise in comparable fan profiles. And despite reducing the fan noise, we have lower temperatures, which is great. And because of the improved efficiency of the 7nm AMD processor and the 8nm RTX 3000 GPU, we're also getting dramatically more performance at the same time. It's amazing, okay? So this machine has some of the best thermals I've ever seen. We're talking under 75 degrees on the CPU and GPU in like almost every single game I played. Now, of course, this will vary a lot depending on what fan profile you set and what game you're playing, but overall, this has been one of the best thermally designed laptops I've ever tested. Now, in terms of actual raw performance, in Timespy, we saw 10,809 points, which tops out my chart, beating even my Area 51M. Now, you can see I managed to overclock the GPU a little further and got over 11,000 points. And when hooked up to an external monitor, so we bypass Nvidia Optimus, we managed to get 11,149 points. Now, the downside to using Nvidia Optimus is that it creates a bottleneck for CPU-bound games, reducing overall performance. Now, when I bypassed Optimus using an external display with the USB-C port, I saw a 7% performance increase in AAA titles and a 29% performance increase in esports titles. This will enable the machine to reach the full potential performance. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Nvidia Optimus is that if you do play at higher resolutions like QHD or 4K, it will be less of a big deal because you're going to have less CPU overhead as you go up in resolution, and games will tend to be more GPU bound. But still, if you're an esports fanatic, you may want to skip this laptop if this is a deal breaker for you, and instead opt for a laptop that has a mux switch so that you can get full GPU performance on the internal laptop display. Now, I did a whole video explaining why Nvidia Optimus reduces performance on this laptop. I'll have a link in the description or at the end if you want to go check it out. But the key thing here is that we're still getting exceptionally good performance for the money, even with Nvidia Optimus crippling some of the CPU-bound game performance. Now, I haven't heard from Asus directly, but I believe there are 3 reasons why Asus decided to use Nvidia Optimus instead of something like a mux switch or an advanced Optimus. First of all, Optimus increases the battery life. Second of all, it allows them to use AMD FreeSync to prevent screen tearing. And third, using FreeSync is cheaper than using a mux switch and using G-Sync. So unless you wanted to pay more for the laptop, this is the best Asus could do at this price point. Now, take a look at these Cinebench R20 and R23 scores. They are topping out the charts for laptop CPUs by a large margin. I've never seen this level of performance before in a laptop CPU, and I'm super impressed. In fact, because of the thermals being so good on this laptop, it makes me wonder if this thing couldn't handle up to like a 100-watt load on the CPU and get even better performance. I did try overclocking this thing, and it just isn't possible out of the box. You can basically only utilize the Asus overclock that's included with the system. I tested over 15 different games and saw fantastic performance, outperforming much more expensive laptops, especially in AAA titles like Red Dead Redemption, which topped out my charts. Now, if you want my full performance analysis, I'll be posting that in a separate video because it's just going to make this video way too long and way too detailed. Just know that this machine is the best bang for the buck all around that I have seen in any laptop, especially at this price point. If you wanted a machine that had comparable power to this machine last year, you would have had to spend over $4,000, and even then, you still wouldn't match the possible performance because this is taking it to the next level in things like Cinebench R23. Now, while this laptop is incredible in many ways, there are a number of downsides to it as well. Arguably, the biggest one is the reduced performance with Nvidia Optimus. Number 2, we have no full-size SD card slot. Number 3, we have no Thunderbolt support because this is an AMD chassis. Number 4, there is no webcam on this device, which I think is essential in 2021. Number 5, it did come with some bloatware, which is kind of a bummer. Number 6, depending on what games you play and what hardware you might have right now, like you might have an RTX 2060 and you play CSGO, you might actually see more FPS with that hardware than this machine, which is a weird thing to say. right? But in many AAA titles, that will definitely not be the case. You'll see massive gains. Now, this laptop is so good, and because there is limited supply of Ryzen 5000 CPUs, you're basically gonna have a really tough time buying this. And I think that's arguably one of the biggest cons, that if you wanna get this laptop in the next 6 months, it might be very difficult to do so. Now, if you're in the market for a laptop right now, I did create a comparison sheet showing all the available RTX 3000 laptops that you can buy. There's a link in the video description down below if you want to check it out. I think the top 2 laptop alternatives in this price range right now is the Asus Zephyrus G17. The nice thing about that machine is that it's a little thinner, a little lighter, and it includes a QHD 100% DCI-P3 165Hz display, which probably will be gorgeous. And then we have the Aorus 15G with an RTX 3080 Max Q, and it only costs $200 more and includes 32 gigs of RAM. I think both of those machines are quite attractive alternatives to this one, especially if you want something a little bit more portable. So in the end, despite Optimus impairing performance in CPU pound games, we still had massive gains in performance, especially when compared to laptops of the previous generation at this price point. Now, in the next 6 months, we should have a number of competitors around this price point from Lenovo and many other brands, so if you're patient, you will have other options to consider. Overall, this is the most impressed in general I've been with a laptop in a long time, and I highly recommend picking one up if you get the opportunity. Now, if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, and if you want to see my detailed performance analysis of this laptop, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you don't miss out. I'll see you in the next one. Brandon, out.